happening.
Welcome to Two Gals and a Glass Half Full. We are in May, which is Mental Health Awareness, and we are in our last episode of the month. I love the last one, and I'm so excited to learn from Melissa again today. So first, Dr. Jess, what do you have in your cup?
Well, today I've got my water bottle because I'm trying to stay nice and hydrated. It's in Florida and it's getting warmer outside, so it's very easy to get dehydrated. So I try and keep this as full as possible. I put a little bit of fresh squeezed lemon in there just to keep it tasting a little bit more, and then I drink more and I keep it nice and cold in this kind of bottle. And then that way I just keep refilling it throughout the day. So, yep. Now, Dr. Bobby, what's in your glass?
Well, I've already had my coffee for the day and I am on track for my water, which is a rare. So I am having some pomegranate kombucha, kind of get some gut health going in there.
Perfect. And then today we have a special guest with us. We have another licensed mental health counselor. This is Melissa Crawford. So Melissa, what's in your glass?
Well, what's in my glass is what's usually in my glass, which I always have a Yeti with me that has ice water, no matter where I am, no matter what I'm doing. Even though, most people say, I hate drinking water all the time, but, you get used to it after a while. Yep, that's what's in my cup.
Yeah, you do. I love it. All right, so with this being the last month of mental health awareness, again, we figured why not talk to somebody that knows more about mental health awareness than we do. So Melissa, from your perspective, when we're talking about mental health, a big global topic that is always helpful is how does mental health impact our relationships with others, our interpersonal relationships, meaning like whether it's family, friends, coworkers. So what's kind of like the big picture of how that can impact us as individuals?
Oh, geez. I mean, I think that's a huge question, right?
It is.
My mind first goes to the opposite of that, which is how do our relationships impact our mental health? But I'll answer your question first.
Yeah, that's fine.
I think that, when we talk about our mental health, it depends on what kind of mental health issues we have going on, right? If let's say something super common like depression, right? If somebody's depressed, most likely they're going to, feel like a burden to other people. They're going to stop answering the phone. They may cancel plans. They're going to become more distant from the people around them, right? Same thing with anxiety that can show up in a very similar way. So, it's kind of a self-motivating cycle when that starts to happen and your relationships start to suffer. Then as your relationships suffer, your mental health can suffer in return, right? So
Right.
it's kind of a self-perpetuating cycle. And a lot of people don't realize just how much, if we're not mentally healthy, think about going through your day, even doing these podcasts or whatever else you're going to do, right?
Mm-hmm.
You're not going to be able to stay focused. You're not going to be able to even have a conversation with me, right? The whole time you're going to be in complete dread mode and not want to be here. So I think that it's just something that people can't see, like they can see a black eye or something, right? If you got into a car accident, but it's always there.
Right. Yeah, I think that's the struggle with mental health is that we all have different struggles. Some of them are very visible to others and they can be sensitive to it. And some of them aren't visible to others. Therefore, there's a tendency to be insensitive to it. And because of that, then it can be something that does seem like it perpetuates much more than if we raise awareness of it. And we could be maybe somebody that recognizes that, wow, this person's canceling on me all the time. Maybe I should check in on them instead of feeling hurt or frustrated or mad. Maybe there's another side to that story that could be explored. Not that you have the answers, but just checking in on them. Hey, I've noticed this trend. Is everything okay? There's very different responses.
Absolutely. Instead of personalizing it, which is, again, that goes back to the mental health of the person on the receiving end of that, right? So that becomes very layered and complicated. There's really so many variables that play a role in it.
Absolutely. And we're not trying to undermine everything. it's more of like kind of that big picture, global picture awareness of what, just how we can maybe look at things from a little bit of a different perspective. And then somehow all of a sudden you start seeing things a lot differently and that communication can change.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What you said also made me think about is not only looking at your own mental health, but being aware of those that are close around you, and kind of being aware if you see changes and like how to kind of step in or let them know you're there. And just, that whole side of it, as well as like recognizing it in others, or recognizing they might be going through a hard time. It doesn't have to be classified as anything.
Absolutely.
Just
I
being
mean,
there to support them.
people don't always know what to do, right? So I'll have a lot of people in my office who will say, well, when my spouse or my brother or whoever it is in their life is going through something difficult and they do pull away, I don't know what to do. Do I push them, right? Do I do I encourage them to do what I know is healthy for them, or do I not say anything because I don't want to make them feel ashamed, or you know, kind of feeling more like a child, right? When we kind of micromanage someone and we're like, well, did you take your medication? Did you go to your support group? Did you go to work today? How'd you sleep last night? Like that kind of stuff, right? So you're right. It doesn't have to be a disorder. I mean, everybody has something, right, that they may be struggling with. That's why we see so many stickers around that say, like, just be kind. We never know what's going on, like with somebody else,
Yeah.
because we don't. But we are quick to make assumptions based on, just we have missing information with other people, and we make assumptions to kind of fill in those gaps. Our brain actually does that as a way of surviving. So if we, let's say we're in the woods in the middle of the night and we're camping, right? And we hear something rustling in the leaves. We don't know what that is, but we're probably not going to stick around to find out, right? We're going to run the other way because our mind is like, okay, that's probably dangerous. So in that way, it can be very helpful, but socially, when our mind fills in the gaps with assumptions about, okay, well, so-and-so hasn't called me back. Oh, I guess they don't want to talk to me. Well, no, maybe they're just struggling. Maybe they don't know how to juggle the kids and the career and the, social life. And maybe they haven't slept. Like, we don't know what's going on with them, right? So
Right.
having that positive assumption that, they don't mean any harm by it, giving them the benefit of the doubt.
Mhm. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. Super helpful. So with that in mind, right? Do you have strategies that you would typically suggest that if somebody does feel like they're pulling away in a gentle way to be able to not talk down or be
Sure.
potentially negative? Do you have strategies that you use?
Sure. I mean, at the end of the day, it's interesting. People, we're not all that different. Um, we all really want to know that we're important to people. We want to know that we're loved, that people actually care about what we have to say, right? So at the end of the day, if we're focused on communicating that instead of starting out a sentence like, well, I don't want to offend you, but, right? I know you guys already had the podcast about the but and
Yeah.
conversation, but anything we say right before but is canceled out when we say but. So,
Mhm.
um, it's something where you want to focus on more of why you're reaching out, right? Like, I love you, I care about you. Are you okay? Right?
Right.
Like, I care about what's going on with you. I'm not mad at you. Um, or maybe I am a little mad at you. I don't know if that's how you feel, but at the end of the day, right? Like, we get our feelings hurt, and sometimes instead of reaching out with an olive branch, we reach out with our own insecurities or our own angers or our own frustrations, right? Or we completely ignore it because we don't know what to do at all. And that doesn't help either, right? So if somebody's struggling and we ignore it, chances are it's not going to help the situation.
I've had a few times where like friends or even patients, I didn't feel like I was doing much, but constantly, how's your day? How's it going? Kind of, and sometimes they answer, sometimes they wouldn't. But then on the other side, when they got through things, they came back and they're like, I just want you to know you're the only person that asked me how I was doing, or you were the only person. And to me, it didn't seem like that. It was just me caring, me wanting to know. And to them, it was a big deal, but they didn't show that at that time. It was when they returned later on when they're feeling better.
Sure. I think
So
about it, right?
that was a good lesson for me to like just keep doing it, even if they're not responding, or even if they're
Absolutely.
same thing over day. No, I'm terrible, or I'm this. Okay, well, let's try this. Like just trying to be positive for them in that moment.
Yeah, being positive for them, seeing them, asking them, showing that concern. But even with people close to you, right, it'd be a little bit different because you would be a little bit more vulnerable with them. And so, it's funny, you had mentioned tips and tricks, or, anything that you would say. It's usually, I think about things in more of an equation standpoint. So for instance, things that you can use that you can apply to any situation, so that you're not just thinking, okay, when I ask her for tips and tricks, if I say, okay, if somebody hurts your feelings because they don't respond, then what do you say to them if you're concerned about their mental health? That's very specific, right? If we talk
Yeah.
about, well, how do you confront someone if you're concerned about them in general, no matter what they're doing? Then that would just have to involve you. First and foremost, if we don't think that somebody really knows what's going on or that they care, we don't care about what they have to say, right?
Right.
So making sure that you are kind of asking yourself first, how am I going to communicate to that person that I really care? And secondly, do I even really know what's going on? Have I given them an opportunity to tell me that? And if they don't want to, then you have to respect that too.
Mm-hmm.
So not being too forceful with it.
Right.
If those are checked off, then we can go to the next part, right? Because then they'll actually want to know, okay, well, oh, you're concerned about me. Oh, okay. Well, let me hear about that. There's that really corny phrase that says, people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that quote.
I think it's corny, just, I've heard it so often, right? But it's so true. It is so true.
Yep. Yeah, I think there's a lot with that. That's part of the interpersonal relationships, is our own awareness of ourselves within how we're dealing with somebody else, and that treat people how you want to be treated. I mean, you want to be cared for by somebody else, whether it's a friend, family, or somebody else, and you just do the same thing in return. But when you have emotions that come in, then this is kind of what we talked about with Erin, is that fire can come up. And so it's like, how do you then look at that fire and be respectful of the fire and not let it get out of control? And then say, okay, like, so there's like, you add the emotion plus the communication, and all the stuff can get like out of hand really quickly. Or we respect the flame and respect that fire, recognize it, and then work on, okay, wait a minute, are we just fueling this over and over and over again? And
sometimes
it doesn't need to be fueled.
It's funny, I'm chuckling.
Like,
I'm chuckling because one of the things I specialize in is couples therapy. And
okay.
so in my practice, I have extensively studied, I don't know if you're familiar with Gottman therapy, right? They've done so much research with couples and relationships to see, what makes couples really thrive and feel connected, not just be together, but be together and be happy and connected and satisfied. And then what kills relationships. So I've started with that, but now really specializing in EFT, which is emotionally focused therapy by Sue Johnson. And, they started out all together, right? So they kind of broke off and started doing their own thing after a while. So I consider them to be like cousin theories, right?
Okay.
But when we're looking at, how do you deal with that fire that comes up? I see that fire all the time in my office, right? And one of my favorite things to do is to teach people how to deal with that. because we don't want to burn everybody. We don't need to burn the whole place down because we feel like we're on fire, essentially,
Mhm.
right? If you're triggered in those moments. So, yeah, you can't have a conversation with anybody, really, let alone your spouse, if you are emotionally triggered in that moment to where your fight or flight has kicked in.
Mhm.
You
Yep.
can't, because in that moment, you feel like you're in danger. And what do we do when we feel like we're in danger? We don't cuddle with the bear, right? We attack the bear, we run away from the bear. Don't, we're like, hey, come here. It just doesn't work that way, right?
Mhm.
So I don't know what you talked about with Aaron entirely, but
Mhm.
I don't want to like repeat information, but I'll tell
Right.
you that, being able to learn how to soothe yourself in those moments and recognize when that's coming up and being able to ride that wave and not make it worse and not extend it. I call it the roller coaster that you got on that you can't get off until it's over, unless you stay on for another ride, right? So we can sit in our head and we can be like, they're so wrong and this is so messed up. And we can really fuel it, or we can starve it there's a lot of different methods for that, but we can starve it and then get into a place where we know, again, um, am I accessible to my partner, right? You ever get
Mhm.
into an argument with somebody and you feel like you can't reach them?
Yeah,
Like they're there, they're
right.
Yeah.
physically there,
Yeah.
but you're like, where did you go?
Right.
So they have to be accessible. Going back to the things I talked about in the very beginning of this podcast, do they really care about how I feel? Right? Are they really listening to me? So I would say, and I don't even know how we got on this anymore, but when we started talking about the fire part, right?
Right.
What do you do with that? And you have your own emotions that come up. I think that's how we got on it.
Right.
When somebody else is maybe struggling with something, how do you deal with your own stuff? You have to have those
Mhm.
conversations with yourself before you can have them with somebody else.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
So I think so where my mind goes is at first it's like, okay, so we can have this awareness of caring and making sure that we're talking to somebody in a caring way, but at the same time, we've got our own emotions to deal with in addition to the awareness of the caring.
Mhm.
And then we've got to go on to the flip side of that, of at some point in time, there might be relationships where it just isn't going to work, right? It might be a friendship, it might be a coworker, it might be a partner, right? um, and at some point in time there might be a recognition of this is just isn't going to be healthy for me because it's not going to be a two-way street, right?
Mm.
So what are some strategies that we might like have out there for recognition of that, because that exists, it
Mm.
does, yeah.
It completely
It does,
does.
yeah.
Right.
Absolutely does. Not
Yeah.
everybody's going to be safe for us, and not
No.
everybody is going to, you know, have earned that spot closest to us in our life, right?
Mhm.
So I would say one of the things to look out for is, it's interesting when you start to put up boundaries with people, the ones that get the most upset with you about them are the ones that were benefiting from you not having boundaries in the first place.
There you go. Yep.
Interesting.
Yep.
So
Yep.
I tell people all the time when they first start dating, I'm like, test your boundaries in the beginning, right? If you're afraid to say, hey, I really don't like this restaurant, or hey, I'm really not happy with something that you had said to me the other day, like I really, I want to talk to you about that. If they have a reaction that is very dismissive, they maybe think you're being ridiculous, right? Or they blame you for for having a boundary, then that's probably a pretty good sign that something is off, that maybe they're not the safest. Maybe you need to back them up a little bit. So consider, something I do with my patients is to consider those emotional boundaries in a physical sense first, right? If you don't trust somebody, you're not going to have them come into your house and sit on your couch and put their arm around you, right? I mean, I hope we're not going to do that because we don't know them. They could hurt us. But we may let them come to our door. We may even like talk to them through the door and be like, hey, what do you need? may even open the door, I don't know, but you're not going to invite them into your house. Same thing if you have somebody come over and they are completely dismissive and disrespectful of everything physically in your house. They're jumping all over your furniture. You're not just going to let them continue to do that, right? So if they're not physically safe for you to have them that close, then why would they emotionally be safe for you to have them close, right? We need to think about it like how can we back them up to the point where we feel like we are not putting ourselves in some type of danger or feeling like like we're not compromising ourselves. And so, yeah, having to be somebody that we're not.
Yeah, absolutely. I think those are like really good strategies. I don't know, Bobby, I think barriers and boundaries are something that are just commonly like not done for yourself. And that's where you kind of get spread too thin. I think you can probably attest to that just as much as I can.
Yes. And I love when
Yeah.
you were talking about like starting relationships. So Jess is married and I am not. And, you know, I feel like those are especially as we're older, you know, like when you're dating, when you're older and you feel like when you're 20, you kind of have like the whole world there, you know, but like when you're getting into your middle, late 30s, the pool is a lot smaller. And so
I've been in that pool in my 30s. I get it.
Yeah. So you feel like you don't want to make any of those sacrifices, but you feel like maybe I should, or, you know, am I being too picky or this? So I love like that thought process on that, because you start doubting yourself and you start kind of, I was like, when you were saying that, I was like, I could talk about this forever.
Me too. I love it. You know, there are certain things you might have on your list. Maybe you want somebody who is certain things that don't need to be on the list, right? But they're like preferences. Like on my list, I used to have, he has to want to ride roller coasters with me and want to, what else was it? Oh, have a real Christmas tree. Okay. Those are whatever. What's really important when you look at your own list is, and this isn't just for people you're just meeting, but people in general, right? Like, are they happy for me? Like genuinely happy for me when things are going well? Or do they get jealous? You know, do they cheer me on, in other words? And even for dating, do they care about how I feel? Do they make room for me emotionally? Are they respectful? Can I trust them? Right? Those things are so sacred in terms of what makes relationships work, right? If we look at even different cultures, different, doesn't have to be just like monogamous heterosexual relationships, right? In America, it could be anywhere. Lies never work in any relationships ever. They just do not work universally.
Right.
So some of the things I was just mentioning, those are things that universally are super important to have in any relationship.
Right. And I think that's something that has been beneficial to me over the years, is realizing what kind of boundaries do I have? And then recognizing when somebody's not respecting that. It's like, it helps me make it a little bit more tangible of why I've been creating distance between myself and that person. It's like, you know, just like you're saying, like something as simple as like, you've got this win that you're like, oh, I'm so excited about this. And then the person comes back with this like jealous comment and it's like derogatory. And you're like, like, why would you just deflate? Why would you do that? Like, I worked really hard for this and then you immediately wanted to deflate me. You know, it's like, and when you have people like that around you on a regular basis, you're just like, what's going on? I feel like I should have a win here, but maybe not. Am I being like over the top? Is something wrong with me? So you start to internalize it. And then it's like, oh, wait, like, as you know, like, at least for me, as the years went on, I started recognizing some of this. I was like, okay, I need to create distance between myself and that person. I do. And then I'm healthier mentally because I'm not constantly being deflated.
Exactly. And I think that comes along with learning yourself and trusting yourself, and, you know, so you second guess that less, right? But you can be around people who are helping you do the opposite. They make
Mhm.
you second guess yourself a lot, right?
Mhm.
They basically, if you're in a relationship where somebody is, it is as simple as this. If you're sitting in a room and you're like, I'm cold, and they're like, you're not cold. That's ridiculous, right? And
Yes. These
and
comments happen all the time.
and
All
it
the
happens
time.
again and again and again, and
Yep.
you're like, well, maybe something's wrong with me. Maybe
Right.
it me, right?
Maybe I'm not cold. I don't know. I've got goosebumps. I thought I was
Right.
cold,
Like
but
I thought it was cold, right? So
yeah.
I mean, I'm exaggerating, right? But it could be
Right.
something bigger than that.
Yeah.
But sure. So sometimes we don't know. That's part of the growing process. Is it me or is it them? Is it people I have around me? There's also that saying, and I don't know, I'm gonna bleep out that it's a little bit tiny bit of curse word in it. I don't know if I'm allowed to curse on here, but it
Yeah.
says that before you go to therapy, make sure that you're not just surrounded by a-holes, right?
Mhm.
Um, because sometimes the feedback we're getting is from people who are very distorted themselves, and so we start to believe that.
Right. Right.
I
Yeah.
find it interesting, like, and this is not just through this conversation, but earlier conversations we've had is I think a lot of our natural tendencies is to internalize and first like put the blame on us, which at least for me, I personally don't think that's a bad thing. I think that's more self-reflection, as long as that self-reflection then turns into a realization of no, it's not me in those cases where it's really not, But I find it
Absolutely.
interesting, Jess, like you were saying, like,
Yeah.
oh, maybe I overdid this, or maybe, like we
Yeah.
just instantly we return to ourselves and like blame it on us.
Because sometimes we are to blame, right?
Right.
Sometimes it's like, nope, I'll take that. That was me. And, okay, I could have handled that differently. I could have communicated that differently. And so there are those times. And then there's the other times where you're like, I'm still not seeing it. And then I'll usually like ask somebody else who I truly
Yeah.
consider safe. And I'm like, I'll give them the feedback of like, hey, how would you feel if in this situation? And then that's how I've kind of started to figure out, like, I do think I need to distance myself from this individual. I don't think that this is something that is, again, it's like, it's not like I'm never going to talk to you again, just like emotionally, I'm going to distance myself.
Just
And
distance,
those words,
yeah.
right. Yeah. And those words just then mean less because I'm not giving them as much power over my feelings.
Correct.
Like, so yeah.
Exactly.
So perfect. Well, I think this has been a super, super helpful conversation. And like I said, the whole goal was just to really kind of get this a little bit, again, broader spectrum conversation of today interpersonal relationships, because that's huge, so huge, and how we as humans see the world, interact with the world, and then give our, like, how we have self-respect and how we see ourselves within this bigger picture. So sometimes there's tactics that we can use that can improve that. Sometimes there's just times where the tactic is to create space, which is fine as well. But just having the awareness that it does go both ways, I think can be helpful. Yeah, perfect. Well, thank you so much, Melissa, for coming on.
Yes,
We
thank
really
you,
appreciate it.
Melissa.
Yep.
Thank you, ladies.
And
I appreciate it.
yeah. So next month we are going to be starting a new topic, and the topic is going to be about sleep and the importance of sleep and all sorts of stuff that we're going to delve into in regard to sleep. And we do have a challenge. So at the end of every episode, we have a challenge. So I do want to say the challenge this week is going to be to try and find a way to understand what your boundaries are. Just understand them. Make your list of what you need as an individual, and then see if you can put that into practice a little bit. All right. Well, we look forward to hearing everyone listening for the next week. Follow us on YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, and then we will be posting Melissa Crawford's information as this episode airs. All right, everybody. Bye.